Hello, everyone, and welcome to another week with the Humanist Association of San Diego. Today, we leave the brain and go for that organ often unexamined in humanist and atheist discourse. We're going for the heart. When we're looking at Western philosophy, we see a time that we typically reify, the Enlightenment, a time that we applied physics and mathematics to human behavior. We saw ourselves as rational mechanical animals. But there was a blowback to the Enlightenment, and that was the Romantic period. That was a period that dug deep into human experience, that sucked the marrow out of the bones of life, that sought to examine what it was to be human, not just that we have viscera and an elaborate network of blood vessels and nerves, but those blood vessels and nerves were hot and alive with life, that we had to expand our experience and understand the experience. And so we are looking at the human experience itself. We're looking into art. In humanism, we often talk about religion, we talk about philosophy, we talk about science, but if we're going to look at what humanism is, it's about the human experience in particular. And you cannot have a thoroughly deep, robust, and beautiful human experience without an appreciation of art. And one facet of art is poetry. Poetry has long been our companion. It connects us through its use of meter, of turns of phrase, of metaphor. It unites us. It connects us. And while we can see poetry often as stuffy and elitist, oftentimes the most profound verse arises from the streets themselves. We see poetry, from epic poetry to slam poetry. We see poetry in human history going back to Gilgamesh, to the 13th century Persian poet Rumi. I am thine and thou art mine. The Shi classical Chinese poetry and its Thai cousin, Klung. We see haiku. We see Chaucer, to Shakespearean sonnets, odes, lyrical poetry, elegies. We see Emerson, Thoreau, Donne, Walt Whitman and his Leaves of Grass. You have your Blakes, your Yeats, your Cummings, and your Barrett Brownings, Emily Dickinson and Sylvia Plath. You had the Beat generation, where Allen Ginsberg saw the best minds of that generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, and naked. You saw Edgar Allan Poe, who shall speak nevermore. You had the Harlem Renaissance with Langston Hughes, who has known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood and human veins. This is from The Negro Speaks of Rivers. And also, I too sing of America. We have Dylan Thomas commanding us to not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. We have Shel Silverstein and of course, Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in your very dirt, but still like dust I rise. We have poetry and recreation. We have poetry just to recite for fun. We have lyrics of songs. We have poetry and religion, from Paradise Lost to scripture itself. And ironically, looking at it, where Thomas Paine, one of our humanist luminaries, talking about religion and prophecy, he says, revelation is only revelation between a God and one human being. After that, it's hearsay. So therefore, all of the prophecy that we see before us is just poetry. We see poetry in Grief and Recovery, the classic poem of the modern age, For the Fallen. We see poetry in public ritual laden with patriotism, from Robert Frost at JFK's inauguration in 1960 to the most recent presidential inauguration, where we had 2017's Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman at the Biden election. We see poetry in love. We see Pablo Neruda. Far better than Love Potion number 9, we have Love Sonnet 17. I love you without knowing how or when or from where. I love you directly without problems or pride. I love you like this because I don't know any other way to love, except in this form in which I am not, nor are you, so close that your hand upon my chest is mine, so close that your eyes close with my dreams. We see poetry as a weapon in Vogon poetry of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker series. We see meaning and meter. We see iamps, trochees, dactyls, anapaests, spondies, and pyrrhic meter. And today we dig into poetry, the celebrated, wonderful, messy, beautiful thing, poetry. It could be your own. So we invite you to read your own poetry. We invite you to also read a poem that inspires you, that represents you. We also invite you to even say a dirty limerick, and bonus points if it's of all three categories. And of course, George Carlin said, more people write poetry than read it. So we invite all of us today to dig into poetry. And as such, before we start, I will read a poem that I cherish, a poem that I often will use when I, as a humanist celebrant, am officiating a humanist wedding. It has one mention of God, but it's a cursory mention, and I often will use it to invite religious family members into the occasion. And I think these words from Max Ehrmann in 1927 are quite humanistic indeed. And I will start the recitations of poetry by my favorite, the desiderata, the desired things. Go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even to the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself, especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years. Gracefully surrender the things of youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield yourself in sudden misfortune, but do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. This is my favorite line, by the way. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, or whatever you conceive him to be. And whatever your labors and aspirations and the noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful, strive to be happy. And while poetry can encapsulate sentiments of a time that can echo throughout time and connect us through the years, poetry isn't dead, it's alive. There are poets today who are offering us glimpses into what the human condition represents. And we have such a person with us today, Megan Rahm. Megan is a restless mom from Toledo who has found her voice in art and writing. Her spirited 5-year-old daughter often inspires her work, and she never leaves her house without her Chromebook and Sharpies. She loves Toledo's weather and hates Costco on a Saturday afternoon. Being an atheist plays a significant role in her life. She never thought she could be open about it, but this book, Free to Roam, is her coming out party, and everyone's invited. To see more of her work, you can check out her blog From the Ashes of Faith at freethoughtblogs.com/ashes. And Without further ado, we welcome Heathen Mommy poet Megan Rahm. Megan, welcome to the Humanist Association in San Diego. And tell us about your poetry, your work, and your book.
Wow, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. I am going to read from my book a little bit today, but I want to tell you a little bit about myself because my poetry, it's very personal. It's about my life. So my poetry book, Frida Rome, Poems from a Heathen Mommy, was published by Free Thought House and released back in February on Groundhog's Day. And then also, like you mentioned, I'm the author of From the Ashes of Faith, which is a blog at freethoughtblogs.com. So I live in Toledo, Ohio, with my husband of 11 years and our 5-year-old daughter. I spend a lot of time at home, a lot of time writing, obviously. I do have a part-time job in an arts program for a local nonprofit, but that job's been greatly affected by the pandemic, so I don't have as much work there. I grew up in rural Northwest Ohio, which is a very conservative area, and that's where I'd like to start. My poetry book is about being an atheist mom in the Midwest. It has 4 sections. The first section is called Curls and Cornfields, and it's about my childhood in the country. So I'm going to read some from my book now. So this first poem is called Beautiful Country. I missed the nights when lightning bugs speckled the endless horizon, and my eyes bathed in the indigo sky. My favorite color has always been newly sprouted winter wheat, an affirmation of new beginnings. I loved waking up after a snowstorm, blinding white, and alone in the silence of the barren landscape. From the delicate irises of spring to the golden blazes of September, every bug in Henry County fluttered its way into our little house. Dark nights of thunder and wind made my heart pound to pieces and sparked a fascination with the dangers of the heartland. Growing up in the country was a crimson struggle of wits and tears, but I will always cherish the beauty of my childhood home. This poem is important to me because I do complain a lot about the country. Like I said, it was a conservative area. It was difficult to grow up there, but um, obviously it wasn't all bad. I had a lot of fun with my friends and family there. I have a lot of good memories. So I wanted this poem to show that it was a good place too. So most of these poems were written during Ohio's stay-at-home order during the pandemic, and that was a period of growth for me as a writer and a mom because I had more time for both. So this next poem is called Thrive, a message to my younger self. Thrive among the stairs meant to strip your future naked. Thrive among the words meant to leave your outlook tainted. Thrive outside the conformity of the minds no longer free. Thrive free of the book that binds their hands and knees. Thrive in your community on the outside looking in. Thrive among your neighbors, ignoring their own sin. Thrive because you're strong and love will always win. So these poems actually start out as a chapbook, and I was going to look for a traditional poetry publisher. But when I learned about Free Thought House, I kind of changed my direction. Free Thought House publishes books just for the secular community, and they have a lot of great titles. It's a really great publisher, and so I was very honored when they accepted my book. So their website is freethoughthouse.com. I'd definitely go check it out. They have a lot of great things there. Okay, so the next poem is called In the Back of a Pickup. Brittle bones chilled beneath frost moon eyes. She clings to the bed of a truck. Sticky pebbles clatter off the hungry tires. Pink sunset flickers through the singing leaves above. Rough road ahead. Alfalfa fields quickly pass by. Purple and green smear across the horizon. She tightens her grip as her insecurities whip in the wind. She's been imprisoned by a home with the biggest sky, but barely a pinprick on the map. One day, despair will grow wings, and a sheltered childhood will be fuel for her adventures. She shivers in the cold and never looks back. So when I was growing up, it was always a treat to ride in the back of a pickup truck, but I would never in a million years let my daughter do it now. So this next poem, this is also from the section about my childhood. This is about when young boyfriends want to convert you. So this is called Christian Admirer. Eyes of lust and honeydew don't mean I grant you permission to invade my liberated world. Drop the slate and let the luster fade. If you want in my life, I'm gonna need you raw, be real. Give up because you'll never change me. Your envy shines like emeralds. I bet purity burns like hell. So the first section about my childhood is probably my favorite section in the book. But now I'm going to move on to the second section here. The second section is called Why I Hate Sunday Morning. It's about my thoughts on Christianity. My family personally isn't very religious, even though we were living in this conservative area. I was definitely surrounded by Christianity growing up, especially in school and from my friends. I did go to a public school, but that didn't seem to matter much. There were prayers at our school events, our school activities. Our band had a chaplain. I was in band growing up. I remember religious posters on the walls of our high school. Yeah, and I can even remember teachers talking about God and Jesus. So it was a very conservative area, and it's sad that was public school. So this next poem is called Grounded. Ivory giggles in pink powder secrets, power and endless charade. Let it all hang out between the pews. Just once, let the cold stairs see your delicate pearl. Let lace and tumbleweed caress your bare skin. Let fellow parishioners blush with envy. Let reality swallow you whole, and you'll realize you don't need to look to the skies. Satisfaction is found right here on the ground. So I don't believe in writer's block or waiting for inspiration. For me, I just have to sit down and get started. It's like priming a well. One thing that's part of my creative process is meditation. I like to meditate with mala beads, and I always wear them on my wrist so I have them when I need them. They really help me with anxiety as well. This next poem is called Stuck in the Closet. There are crowds of atheists cloaked in the long shadows of steeples, even more than we know. They swallow the truth because they think they have to, because maybe they were raised that way. 1, 2, 10 years in a dark closet, their thoughts echo in the loneliness. They secretly question as a tortured mind now liberated, yet another voice suppressed. They're scared, but even more angry. I know that innermost turmoil. That anger will fuel progress, a passionate fire that lights the way. The most liberated life is an honest one. So this next poem is actually a list, and I feel it's painfully honest. It's called 7 Reasons I Don't Speak Up. 1, to avoid confrontation. 2, so I don't have to explain myself. 3, because we still have to work together, and I don't want it to be awkward. 4, to avoid discrimination. 5, so I can survive Thanksgiving dinner. 6, because you won't take me seriously. 7, because I was told not to. Ever since this book came out, I'm a little more outspoken about being an atheist and a humanist. And I did for a time worry about my job and about finding future work if it really, if the word got out about my book. But so far nothing's happened. So I think I'm okay. This next poem is about an old friend of mine who went from skeptic to Christian. A few years ago, I had lunch with her. I hadn't seen her for a while. And she told me about how she was miserable. She had this job that she just absolutely hated. And then all of a sudden, she found this new job and it's wonderful and she's happy there. And she told me she couldn't have done it alone, that God must have helped her. So this, obviously, she did do it on her own. So this poem's about her. It's called You Didn't Need God. You said you couldn't do it alone, but you did. We are all powerful in our own lives. Scale that jagged cliff. Surf those tempest-swept waters. You are in charge. You are secretly sure-footed, resourceful, with undiscovered confidence. What you think is strength in God is really strength within yourself. You are more capable than you know. So now I'm going to move on to the third section. So this is the second to last section. The third section is called The Nice Heathen Family Next Door, and it is all about my life as a mom in Toledo. So this first poem is called Playdate. In a quiet neighborhood tucked between accountability and appearances, I live among you, the outwardly faithful. With my soccer mom SUV, weekly gymnastics classes, over-the-top birthday parties, picky eater battles, car seat wrestling, and inevitable grocery store meltdowns. My silent anger presses behind my warm, neighborly smile. Your small talk is carefree and careless. Would you let your bratty kid play with my bratty kid if you knew I was an atheist? So this is one thing I worry about living in Toledo. I worry about how my daughter might be affected by me being an atheist. What's that going to be like when she starts making friends at school and meeting other families? And she did just start kindergarten a few weeks ago. So I'm a little worried about it. So this next poem is called Midwest Mom. I am describing myself in this, but there is definitely a stereotype about Midwest moms. I don't have the short haircut and I don't like sports, but I think I'm definitely a Midwest mom. So, okay. Passive aggressive with a nervous giggle. I'm a casserole of sweet and salty. My soft meat and potatoes pudge keeps me warm in the snow. I'm a Midwest mom from a family caught between the farm and the city. My daughter's urban upbringing looks a lot different from my childhood in the country. Generations of strong women before me have given me a lot to live up to. We're steeped in tradition, but must keep moving forward. My little girl's smile lights the way, reaffirming growth in the blackest of swamps. Tomorrow looks bright if you squint a little. So when I say the blackest of swamps, I'm actually talking about the Great Black Swamp of Northwest Ohio. This whole area was covered in swampland and it was drained for farming back in the mid-19th century. And my family did play a part in that. My family's farm was established in 1852. So we've been here for quite a while. Now I'm moving on to the final section, which is called Midwest Mom, Meatloaf and Revolution. The fourth section is about optimism. This is called We'll Keep You Well. We are all connected, one brain to another, and most of ours are broken. Our solutions are easy or complicated, but our wellness is a delicate state. Stability often comes from a pill bottle, and that's okay. Balance is the hard part. Be your own normal in an unforgiving world of rigid expectations. Come out of the dark and brush your tired smile. We're here to lift you up. Crawl if you can't walk, but keep moving forward. Your day in the sun is coming. So I write about mental health a lot. You'll see that on my blog as well. I am a certified peer supporter in Ohio. Um, I do have a couple mental health diagnoses myself, and I write about that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But before I wrote for Free Thought blogs, I also wrote for healthyplace.com, which is a popular mental health site. This next poem is the poem the book was named after, Free to Roam. And I think this poem really sums up this project for me. So here's Free to Roam. Let questions swirl in my brain as my eyes strain at the glow of the screen. I'm a tired mom from the heartland with the world at my fingertips. Opportunities and choices are overwhelming, and a world becoming so small. My corner of the planet is now yours as I peer into your faraway life. Once impossible connections are made as I share my story with the world, isolated but no longer alone. Okay, I'm going to read one more poem from the book, and then I have some other stuff I want to talk about. So this last poem I'm going to read, it's called Girl Mom. And it's actually my husband's favorite poem. You know, this book was written during the pandemic, and normally when I have a writing project, I go to the library and I meet with different writing groups. You know, I get help. But obviously, none of that was going on during the pandemic. So my husband was the one reading all of my work, and he's not a big fan of poetry, but he was very helpful. So I think it's important that I read this poem, his favorite one. So this is called Girl Mom. How do I protect my daughter from having the stories all women have, from fearing the night and walking alone? How do I protect my daughter when rapists run for president, when boys will be boys, when an accusation is too frequently overlooked? How do I protect my daughter when she doesn't have a say, when her body is property and legislation dictates her future? How do I protect my daughter from 78 cents to the dollar, from taxes that come in pink, from old and rotten expectations? How do I protect my daughter from the shards of glass when she destroys the glass ceiling and leads the way in a man's world? How do I support my daughter when she no longer needs my protection? So that's Free to Roam, Poems from a Heathen Mommy. It's available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and freethoughthouse.com. If you go to freethoughthouse.com, you can get signed copies. But I guess you could also tell from the book that being a mom gives me a lot to write about. I do want to talk to you about, I have another book that I'm working on that's also going to be published by Free Thought House. It's a memoir about being an atheist with a mental illness. I really wanted to include it today because even though it's a memoir and it's kind of written like a series of essays, I do include a lot of poetry in it too. So I wanted to share that with you. So the book is about being an atheist with a mental illness. My primary diagnosis is schizoaffective disorder, and becoming an atheist was very crucial to my recovery. I struggle with psychosis sometimes, which for me means visual and auditory hallucinations. Prior to treatment, I called my hallucinations spirits and ghosts. I'm not I've never been a religious person, but that was the only thing connecting me to any kind of spirituality or religion. So it was very confusing. But then when I started treatment, I took antipsychotic medication and the hallucinations went away. So I learned that the ghosts weren't real and neither was God. And that being an atheist really provides insight for me, which has been very helpful. And like many people with a mental health diagnosis, I have more than one. I've also struggled with an eating disorder for most of my life. And a lot of the poetry is about that. So I want to share 3 poems from that book for you. So this first poem is called Fight. It's about how an eating disorder is often a lifelong battle, and it's okay to ask for help a second time. Falling down to the sickness, tiptoe around the shards. Rip your pretty dress on the thorns, you'll eat your feelings or starve. Waking up to the wreckage, the past still whispers in your ear. Sweep and mop the stage because today your number is up. Standing up to the darkness because your light is brighter than you think. Sing your beautiful song even when no one can hear you. Rising up for tomorrow, stomp out the nagging shivers. Fake it at your best because the best is yet to come. Giving the world a show because you can and you must. You're a star in your own right, and today you chose to fight. This next poem is also about eating disorders. It is about sex and eating disorder recovery. When I was really struggling with my eating disorder, I was pretty young. I was a teenager and in my 20s. And I preferred to have sex in the dark because I was always worried about what I looked like. And I didn't enjoy sex that much. I just kind of wanted to please my partner. And now that I'm in recovery, it's very different from me now. I'm very different being older and married and overweight. And so this poem is about that. It's called Naked Confidence. Nourish me. My body, soft and feminine, has an appetite. Touch me. Graze your fingertips over my smooth, milky curves. Flip the switch, no longer in the dark. I let go and have fun. The taste of your lips gives me tingles. I want you, but I must put myself first sometimes. My amazing body needs to be loved by me before I can enjoy time with you. So I smile, giggle, and show you what I want. This is my revolution. One thing that's interesting about recovery, I think, is just the support system that you form. It can be family and friends. I've met a lot of people through NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's a great organization. They have a lot of support groups and different programs. But this next poem is called Together, and it's about connections made in recovery. There's a fire in my eyes. Smoke collects in my brain. My burning can be felt for miles, but I see your flame too. Talk me down from the very top. Catch me if I fall. Outstretched arms and stretched out smiles. Are you as tired as me? Dig deep because our ripple just became a wave. Our words are in harmony when we rise up together. Compassion is catching. You should take a bite. One out of love and one out of life. So I wanted to share a little about my blog as well. I do share poetry on my blog. I talk a lot about mental health, life, family. I also like to throw out questions about atheism and humanism. I recently threw out the question, can you be an atheist as well as spiritual? And that got a lot of comments. That started an interesting discussion. One thing I do is I have a series on my blog called A Secular Childhood, Letters to My Daughter. And it's all about things I want my daughter to learn from being raised in a secular household. So this is one of the letters. Dear daughter, I feel like death is a complicated subject when it shouldn't be. It's our feelings surrounding death that makes things complicated. I'm scared of death, which is natural, but I'm not worried about where I'm going in the afterlife. I'm scared because there's so much I want to do in life. Will I get to do all of those things? Will I've spent enough time with my loved ones? I recognize my worries are pretty pointless because when you're dead, you're not aware of your goals and wants anyway. Death is only sad to those still living. The belief in souls, heaven, and hell really makes the idea of death murky. I have a simpler explanation. Humans are a part of nature, another speck in the universe, and death is just part of our life cycle. We return to the earth which we've always been a part of. Instead of worrying about death, it's better to concentrate on enjoying yourself now. Your time could be up at any time, so live your life to the fullest. My beautiful daughter, I'm really enjoying the time I'm spending with you right now, and that's all that really matters. Love, Mom. I have some other poetry that I'm working on, and my blog is really a platform for me to promote other work that I'm doing. I'm writing a poetry book called Unsettled, which is about my family. There is a post on my blog from 6/19 called Racism in the KKK, What I've Learned from My Family's Dark Past, that talks a little bit about that poetry book. I'm also writing an erotic poetry book called The Housewife Who Ruled a Kingdom. And if you go back to Valentine's Day, I posted a video on my blog reading some of the erotic poetry. So that's all I have for you. So thank you so much for having me. And again, my book, Free to Roam, Poems from a Heathen Mommy, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, freethoughthouse.com. And if you go to freethoughthouse.com, you can get a signed copy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Megan. There are two poems that I'd like you to cover. There are two poems that they're shorter ones, but I found them to be quite humanistic. And if you could, as I share the screen, if you could read it and talk about it. I really like these from your book. And I shared the link also for Amazon. So that way, if anyone would like to pick up a copy from Amazon, if you have an Amazon subscription of some type. But here we are. Here's the first one. There we go. Why I Hate Sunday Morning. I like this one.
Oh, gosh, I forgot about those. Those are the ones at the beginning of the sections. I haven't seen that in so long. That's funny. The world is an amazing place. I see good in my everyday life, and potential is around every corner. I don't need God to feel inspired. I forgot about those little poems. That's funny.
And then the second one.
Yeah, yes, okay. I believe there are things we cannot explain yet. That doesn't mean we should make up answers rooted in the supernatural. Sit with and accept your fear of the unknown. Science will catch up.
Very good. I like those a lot. So I just have a few questions. Did you study poetry, or is this avocation of yours something that is just a creative expression on its own?
I actually, just before writing this book, like I was already interested in poetry, but I took a college class in poetry, and it was amazing. It makes me want to go back to college. But I learned a lot from that class, but honestly, I threw a lot of it out the window too. You know, I just, everything I write is just from my everyday life. You know, I don't always think about meter and rhyming and all, you know, all these different things that some poets incorporate. I don't know. I just do what comes from my heart, you know?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And I want to open this up. I'd like to open this up for questions from anyone, for you about yourself, your work, the book, and then we'll all, most of us, some of us will share some particular poetry, and when we start with that, we will hand it over to Christine. But are there any questions for Megan, or comments for Megan, or praise for these wonderful poems?
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Megan. I really enjoyed hearing all of them. And I loved from the perspective of you, a mom, a Midwesterner, and all the different facets to who you are. So I enjoyed that aspect of it.
Thank you.
Mike on the phone. Gosh, you're so delightful. It's such a joy to hear you read, and your philosophy is so wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation. Looking forward to getting your book and for the rest of your lecture today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and
I want to.
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to just mirror that or echo that sentiment. It's absolutely lovely to hear your perspective, and I don't have children. I have no interest in having children, so it's always I like to always appreciate mothers who are out there doing their best. You know, we're living in a world where we don't know what might happen to our children, and we don't know what they're going to experience. And you're just, you're doing your best. So good job, Mom.
Thank you.
And I have to say one thing, being a fellow Midwesterner by birth. I was born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska. I left when I was 20. But I like the imagery that you would use talking about being a Midwest mom and referring to yourself as a casserole, because that is so incredibly Midwestern. That's incredibly Midwestern. And so, since many of us in here are poets ourselves, and poetry is a way to connect and to give a window into our own lives and our own thoughts, and as such, as other people read and experience, we can feel the connection, and we can examine our own selves, and in a sense, bringing us all together and bridging us together. Christine, would you like to read some of your work?
Okay, well, I am not a poet. I'm not a published poet. I'm a musician. But so I wasn't expecting to carry this program, but I will share a few things that I do enjoy, a few pieces that I do enjoy, and one that I wrote. So let me bring it up. So I've got three topics here. I'm going to read three, and two. One is very well known, but the three topics are tragedy, death, and then life. So I'm thinking of maybe in that order. So let me bring up the tragic one first. And that's the one that I wrote. Give me a second here. It's short. All right, this is I dedicated to lives that have been cut short, and it's called Blossom's Dream. From the dank, cold earth, a bud emerged. It felt the rain breathe life into its veins, radiant life, imagined beauty, indescribable, velvet petals, wild colors, vivid, alive. The sunlight's caress, the morning's kiss, the warmth of day, alive, vibrant, imagined beauty unspeakable, blossoming full and sweet, trampled by hardship, by life's misfortune. It was just a dream.
Wow, that was nice.
I don't remember where I was mentally when I thought, it must have been, it had to do with, must have been migrants or immigrants dying. It could have been, I suspect that's where it was, my mind was. But thank you. So that's the tragic one. Now, the next, everybody, well, I suspect that most of you know, but this is just one of my favorites. And you already mentioned this, Jason, when you were talking about you mentioned just about every well-known poet when you were when you started this presentation. So this is Dylan Thomas, about death, and probably some of you can guess, and you started to say some of this poem already, Jason. That's "Do not go gentle into that good night." But I want to read it. You know, I know you probably know it, but I really enjoy this, so I'll just read it. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright, their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And I love this one because it speaks about living, you know, to me, as I start to, as I move into my senior years, I want to be able to look back and see a life well lived. And yes, I will always be raging against the dying of the light. That's my philosophy. So yeah, it's inspiring. It's inspiring for anybody at any age to live and push back against anything that does not allow you to thrive and live. So, so that's the death one. And the last one I wanted to share, and I don't know if you guys know that the 20th century, the well-known 20th century physicist Richard Feynman, who loved to play bongos and studied, what did he study? He studied Tuvian throat singing by traveling to remote, I forget which remote area in China. Is there a tuba? Tuvian. But anyway, he wrote poetry, kind of like a beat poet himself. So this one's about life, life, not about living life. This is sort of on a cosmic level life. So I'll read this one. This is a little bit longer than the others. So Richard Feynman, I don't know when he wrote it, somewhere in the late 20th century, I guess. There are rushing waves, mountains of molecules, each stupidly minding its own business, trillions apart, yet forming white surf in unison. Ages on ages before any eyes could see, year after year, thunderously pounding the shore as now. For whom? For what? On a dead planet with no life to entertain. Never at rest, tortured by energy, wasted prodigiously by the sun, poured into space. A might makes the sea roar. Deep in the sea, all molecules repeat the pattern of one another till complex new ones are formed. They make others like themselves and a new dance starts, growing in size and complexity, living things, masses of atoms, DNA, protein, dancing a pattern ever more intricate. Out of the cradle onto dry land, here it is standing, atoms with consciousness, matter with curiosity, stands at the sea, wonders at wondering. I, a universe of atoms, an atom in the universe. So yeah, I like that one because it really talks about life on a very, this sort of cosmic, from our origins until now, at least humans' ability to be conscious, how it emerged from evolution from that started with the Big Bang. So, well, those are my three things. that I wanted to share. I don't have a whole presentation. And I'm certainly not published, but I do enjoy reading others' works and sharing with others as well. So
That was
thanks
nice.
for-
Thank you.
So thanks for indulging that.
That was lovely. Michelle.
Quick question. So I am also a writer. I not published any books or anything. When in my journalism years, I did publish articles and whatnot. But I love that you said that you don't believe in writer's block. I love that you said that you just kind of work through it. Could you talk to us a little bit more about your process in writing?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's like priming a well. You just have to get the motivation to just sit down and get started. And I think for writing, that can be easy because you could just start like a journal entry, just something very simple about something that's happened to you or your day. And that's usually how I get started. Everything I write is inspired from my real life. So I just write about things that happen to me. It's I don't know. I've never really struggled with writer's block. I just sit down and do it.
I love it. And you said you had groups that you would write with. So are you just not doing any even like Zoom groups or anything like that for writing seminars?
No, right now I don't have any groups that I'm involved in, but Toledo Lucas County Public Library is pretty amazing, and they have all sorts of groups normally, but just with the pandemic, obviously they're not having groups. But I'm really looking forward to the day that we can do that again, though.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And Suzette, you had a selection you'd like to read as well.
Actually, yes. Thank you. I'd like to start with the ones that I've written first. And if we have time, then I would like to read from one of my favorite poets. This is called Behind, and it's very, very short. Behind every behind is an asshole.
That's good.
This is called An Atheist Prayer. And this was, I wrote this in 2000 and it was published in 2011 in Rational Alternative. It's a magazine in Los Angeles. It's called An Atheist Prayer. Today's technology is sorcery and witch hunts still exist. If I believed in any gods, I believe they would be pissed. This one is called A Noble Game. It was published, I wrote it in 1997, and it was published in 1997 in a online publisher, listenandbeheard.net. And it's honoring a certain person who changed a game. And I won't tell you that until I'm going to see if you can figure it out. If not, then I'll just say at the end. Okay, it's a noble game. It is a seduction. It is a seducer. It is a lustful lover. It is narcotic. It is intoxication. It is a season in hell or heaven with Rimbaud. It is worthy of poetry. It is the poet. It is the poem not yet written, yet being obsessed by it. It is great music. It is the composer. It is the notes of the symphony not yet performed. It is playful mind games. It is lofty war games. It is pleasurable madness, a dangerous mate. It is a noble game, not always played by noble men. It's about the game of chess.
Oh.
Okay. there is two places in North Beach in San Francisco. I'm from Northern California originally. And Ferlinghetti, one of the greatest poets ever, has he has since passed, I think a year ago. And he started a book store called City Lights in San Francisco on North Beach. And right across the street from it is Vesuvio's Window, which is a bar. And that is where the beat poets used to hang out, both places. So one New Year's Eve, I went there and I just observed what was going on in that area of the city. And I titled this Vesuvio's Window. And this I wrote in 2003. Second story mountaintop, bloodstained window pane, altitude 2003. Outside, some unlucky loitering lost souls are hoping to see their last chance for romance. North Beach New Year's suicide smiles leave yesterday's dignity in dumpsters. Aroused alleyways take aim at carte blanche capitalists, counting down their future victories while Miss Liberties behind bars with no booze. Columbus Street aberrant authority, brandishing billy clubs and guns, beat the clock and shoot the breeze, all part of the bourgeoisie make war, not love campaign. Money, men, and madness, wine, women, and war. Marriage is made in hell. Heaven doesn't knock on anyone's door, and Avon doesn't call. No one's bawling in Avalon, and every year the gilded goddess of Winterland dances the last waltz with the tarnished tambourine man. Mad Hatters with cell phones announce Handel's Messiah, now performing fellatio for the deaf. Hookers without pimps, hookers without shame, hookers with sexy souls, hookers with red hair, and names like Flame give head or hand jobs to the unemployed. Topless minds, bottomless pits, toll booth truths, laminated lies, puzzle piece people desperate for a peek at the big picture. Digital, Dolby, and double-sized, this is my life right here. What's left now, this very moment? Am I living a luscious lie? My fear is greater than the feeling, or do I choose the treacherous, unpaved path, weaving my own Teflon tapestry, where silence speaks to me, then spanks me silly?
Wow, I love that.
Thank you. When the poets that I was reading when I was writing are symbolists like Baudelaire. They're symbolist poets, and so they really speak to me. And again, like you, Megan, when I was writing, it was about everyday stuff, what I saw, what I felt, getting up in the morning, it's just all around you. I feel like, I don't know, maybe you can relate to this or not, or even Christine too. But don't you feel like a sponge sometimes, that you just absorb everything and that you get overloaded sometimes, just with, it's just so much, because you're like omnivorous. You just take it all in, the smells, the sights, the sounds, everything, and then you have to do something with it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Yeah.
This one here is called Woman, and I wrote it in 1995, and this was published in 1997 in the New Times in Seattle. When I was doing a lot of writing, I was living in Seattle, and there was a whole group of poets that we used to hang out together. We did poetry readings almost every week. We were written up in the newspaper with our names and everything about it. There was a reporter that would come down and watch us and stuff. He was very interested in us. It was really a lot of fun. And Seattle, the University of Washington, they had a couple of professors, writing professors, that would do free seminars at Barnes and Noble, writing seminar, free. Wow. And so I would go, we would all go, because I mean, my gosh, why not? And they were very, very encouraging with my work. Most of my work is very erotic. And they just kept telling me, keep writing, keep writing. So I did, but I don't do that anymore. Anyway, I got off track there. This is called Woman. Her tears, the ocean, her eyes, the sun, the moon, light. Her breath, the wind, her thoughts, the air, breathe. Her flesh, the fervent land, touch it, nourish it carefully. If she is to survive, unlike man, she will need to carefully breathe light.
Nice.
Thank you. And then this, the last one of mine, it's called Art Changes Everything. And I wrote this in 2009. Art changes everything. The absence of art changes everything more.
Mm.
And then I would like to end then with a poem by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. It's from his Coney Island of the Mind, his masterpiece. I mean, anybody who knows anything about poetry knows about this book and him. And I had, when I was still living in Northern California, they were celebrating one of his birthdays, and I brought this book with me. It's very, very used, but it's still intact. And this is a treasure for me. But I had him sign my favorite poem in the book. So it's actually signed by him.
Oh, wow.
Makes it even more, special and valuable. But there isn't a poem in here that isn't worth reading. It's just called 14. That's the title of it. Don't let that horse eat that violin, cried Chagall's mother. But he kept right on painting and became famous and kept on painting. The horse with violin in mouth. And when he finally finished it, he jumped up upon the horse and rode away, waving the violin. And then with a low bow, gave it to the first naked nude he ran across. And there were no strings attached.
Good.
Those are wonderful, Suzette. Those are amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. I have lots.
I love when poetry can be humorous. And
Yep.
I have a short selection I want to read. There are just 2 haikus. There was a book called Gay Haiku that came out in 2005 by a man by the name of Joel Durfner. And these are just fun. It's just kitschy gay culture. See the 8-year-old knitting mittens on the bus. Does his mother know?
Yeah.
And then lastly, I love this one especially. I think this one echoes me a little bit. You were perfect. Then you misspelled embarrassed. Don't call me again.
Priceless. Yeah. That's
these are fantastic. I remember seeing that book a long time ago at a gay bookstore that I was working at in Boston for a little while, and it was just full of really good ones. And I have one last one to share out of this that it's a little more edgy, and I think you'll appreciate this. The salmon's divine, but I'm afraid we can't stay. I fucked our waiter. Clever.
Yeah.
Clever.
Yep.
Like I said earlier, poetry has been with us for quite a long time, and a lot of what we know about ancient cultures come from epic poems. And the thing about an epic poem, and this is a great commentary on when you hear ideas about how advanced we are and how advanced we've become, about how in the past they said, well, those people weren't even literate. Well, the fact of the matter, can you even remember a phone number these days? Do you know your spouse's or your significant other's phone number off the top of your head? Could you recite that? I mean, you might be able to recite your grandmother's phone number or your mother's phone number because you had to remember that. But if we look at our past, what about the epic poems? What did people have to do back then, back when in the days when people simply, quote unquote, were not literate? People would memorize poems that could last for days to recite. I think that's just absolutely amazing. And on top of that, we look at different cultural periods and they're often marked by their poems and their poets. For example, we had a counterculture movement in the 1950s that was marked by poets, the Beat generation.
Yeah.
And could have we had the Harlem Renaissance without the poets of the Harlem Renaissance?
No.
I found another one that I'd like to share that I wrote, if that's okay, if you don't mind. This is short. It's about awakening. It's called Orpheus Awakens. From the bowels of dead civilizations, I emerge, awakened by a rustling of times now ripe for a new dawn. From the pulps of crushed dreams, a divine nectar is formed and offers itself to anyone who will taste. Awake, my friends, awake. Awake, my brothers, awake. Awake, my sisters, awake. Awaken to that which by birth is yours, a right of existence. Go there, take it. It is yours and mine, ours. We take together that which was ours from many eons ago. From the bowels of dormant ages, we emerge.
Yeah.
So that's just about, for me, that just sort of symbolizes finding your voice and waking up to it. So voice for all the oppressed.
It's wonderful. There was also something that I mentioned earlier that I think is particularly interesting because as humanists, there are particular works of literature that stand out. If there's a canon of the essential works of humanism, certainly the Age of Reason would fall within that canon of the essential works, probably in the top 5. And in it, I think it's really interesting how Thomas Paine looks at the scripture, looks at the Christian scripture, and of course he's talking about revelation, and he says that revelation is only revelation between the source to a recipient. Thence after it becomes hearsay. Additionally, all the prophets that we read in the scripture, the Christian and Jewish scripture, it's not prophecy, it's merely poetry.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think that's a powerful notion to take with us. And if we find ourselves in discourse and dialogue where people are lobbying, they're lobbying at us the expectations that we have to adhere to the ideas that revelation and prophecy in scripture is something that we have to address on the merits of the veracity of revelation itself. I think that's a really good thing to say to them, that it's not prophecy, it's merely poetry. But the question is it good poetry?
Yeah, that is the question. Pablo Neruda said that poetry eroticizes language. And I think he makes a very good point.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very powerful. It really gives you a visualization of words and the power of them and how you use them. Yeah.
And also, what about that idea that I mentioned earlier about the poets at different inaugurations? For example, at the 1960 inauguration, we had Robert Frost with an original poem for that day, The Gift Outright. The land was ours before we were the land's. She was our land more than 100 years before we were her people. She was ours. In Massachusetts, in Virginia, but we were England, still colonials, possessing what we still were unpossessed by, possessed by what we now no more possessed. Something we were withholding made us weak until we found out that it was ourselves. We were withholding from our land of living, and forthwith found salvation in surrender. Such as we were, we gave ourselves outright. The deed of gift was many deeds of war, to the land vaguely realizing westward, but still unstoried, artless, unenhanced. Such she was, such as she will become.
Yeah.
That was for whose inauguration?
Kennedy's.
Kennedy's.
Okay.
Kennedy.
Oh.
Additionally, who saw the 2017 Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman deliver the poem at Joe Biden's inaugural address?
Yep. Oh yeah.
It
Brilliant.
was
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah.
And for those who haven't seen it, I'd like to play a little bit of it because
Yeah.
it was powerful. It was quite powerful.
Yep.
And we see poetry is something that connects us across time. It draws us together. There's a particular form of rhetoric called epideixis, and epideictic rhetoric is meditative rhetoric, not just to think about a theme, but to feel a sense of nostalgia that facilitates an experience of being connected in a profound way to those moments. And here is Amanda Gorman. And it was so profound and so beautiful that it's worth sharing now. One second there.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Yep.
It's still moving to hear
Yeah,
that.
sure is. Timeless.
So when we think about Robert Frost and we think about Amanda Gorman, what are some parallels and what are some differences that we can see between these particular inaugural poems?
You're talking about the poem that you read about from Robert Frost, right, at the inauguration of Kennedy.
Mm-hmm. There was a haunting theme about meditating on who we are as a people, and with the meter involved with the poems themselves. Of course, Gorman's poem was far more rhythmic, and it was laden with optimism. It wasn't just a haunting call to think about who we are in the context of history, but as well, it was laden with optimism.
Well, she's young too, so we don't want her to be pessimistic, right? She's young, so the difference in age between the two is significant. you know, where they are in their life, you know. So yeah.
I only heard what you read, Jason, so I would have to hear it again because I had not heard that Frost poem before, but it sounded like the context of it referred to mainly the immigrants that settled here, finding their place in this country. I don't know if I'm misreading that or misunderstanding, but I would have to hear it again. It didn't seem, to me, it didn't, there was a lack of inclusiveness that was very different than what the person, what was her name?
Amanda Gorman.
Yeah, Amanda. Yeah. So yeah, there's seemed to be a lack of inclusiveness that was not evident in Amanda Gorman's poem. So, but maybe I'm just misreading.
What's that?
But maybe I'm just misreading because I just heard it once. I would have to hear it again.
Was there a poem at Trump's inauguration?
What? Why would there be a poem at Trump's inauguration? He probably hated poetry.
You wouldn't know what it is. You know, a poem, what the hell is that? You know, you wouldn't, but you know, I mean, ugh.
Let's see. The poems that were read at each presidential inauguration. See, this is who I am. I just get a spark of curiosity that I have to dig in deep to locate. From Literary Hub, read every presidential inauguration ever performed, and there are fewer than you think. So of course, Robert Frost, The Gift Outright, Bill Clinton. So it wasn't for another 62 years that we got this one. On the Pulse of Morning, by Maya Angelou. Clinton's second one, Miller Williams, Of History and Hope. Barack Obama. So I guess when it boils down to it, there are no Republican inaugural poems.
Oh my
They
gosh.
just don't like poetry.
Wow.
They don't like, no, they don't understand it. They think it's useless.
So if you like poetry, I guess your task is to vote Democrat. And also the Democrats tend to give more funding to the arts. So if you like poetry, vote Democrat.
Yep, right. That's right.
Well, we're approaching 3 o'clock. Megan, thank you so much for being so generous to be here today. And Christine and Suzette, thank you for your generosity of sharing your poetry as well. I think we'll start wrapping this up, and final thoughts on poetry, final thoughts on art and humanism's connection to poetry.
Well, thanks for putting this together, Jason. Humanists, atheists, we are much more than just anti or non-religious. There's so many other facets to who we are. And I'm glad that you created this forum for us to share some of those other facets.
That's what we're here for. And also, can thank Megan for this, because if she hadn't reached out about speaking for our community, then this might not have happened. And so we'll certainly have more events on poetry. Back in, well, it's not poetry necessarily. Back in February of this year, we hopped on our annual reading of Inherit the Wind. As a community, we do a play reading once a year to commemorate Charles Darwin's birthday. We just distribute as you come into the room, and it used to be an actual room in a community center. We would distribute the names of characters in the show, and it didn't matter the age, the sex, the race. You got that character, and it didn't matter how different they were from your own personal demography. You read that character, and we put on a play, an impromptu play. Of course, we cast some of the leads, but everyone got together and enjoyed what it was like to be a thespian for an afternoon. And coming up in a few weeks, we're going to be doing the same thing for Free Thought Day, which marks the end of the Salem witch trials. And of course, Free Thought Day is the 11th, which that's also Indigenous Peoples Day. So we are going to be celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day first. And then the following week, we're going to commemorate Free Thought Day by a community play reading of The Crucible, because we have artistic impulses, and as we get older, we ossify in our artistic impulses. We let them go. We get rusty. We were told as kids that we couldn't sing, or we couldn't draw, we couldn't paint, we couldn't dance. Well, maybe that might prevent us from a career in them, but it should not stifle us in being an amateur who does it for fun, And for those who joined us before when we did Inherit the Wind, like Christine, what did you think about that? You played one of the main characters. You had a lot of fun. You were great, by the way.
That was fun. Yeah, that's fun. I love, discovering, just doing things that are expressive, whether it's music, literature, poetry, other forms of art. That's kind of what I really enjoy doing, what makes me feel alive. So, yeah.
And with that, I think that closes our meeting. Christine, you said it best. Art is that which makes us feel alive.
Yeah.
So, Megan, I'll give you the last word. Thank you for being here. Any final thoughts?
I just wanted to say thank you. I think this was just absolutely fantastic, and you did a great job organizing everything, Jason, and just thank you for letting me share my work.
Oh, of course. And we also have to thank everyone who helps us put these events together. Tuesday nights, we have a leadership meeting, and we have to thank Christine is there, Craig is there, Andreas, Jeremy, Oso, Mike, myself, and many others. And this is a group effort. So what you're seeing today is the work of a fair number of people. And that's why our meetings are so amazing, because, and Michelle as well. We can't forget Michelle either. That's why our meetings are so amazing, because it's not the product of one person, it's the product of a number of people, and we do this because it's important. I guess that's I'll add to Christine's sentiment that art is that which makes us feel alive, and we focus on art because it's important. All right, everyone, thank you for being here today. And next week we have our annual Logical Fallacy Clinic. So have a fantastic week, and we will see you next week.